The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
This is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
it might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report, Part 2 of the Mega Playoff Pod. If you missed Part 1, Cousin Sal and Aaron Schatz from Football Outsiders were on that one. On this one, we're going to have Chad Millman from ESPN in a little bit. But right now, on the Subway Fresh Tech Hotline, it's no longer the year of Lombardi, so we're going to have to settle for the decade of Lombardi. Mike Lombardi, what's happening?
Not much, Bill. Excited for playoff time.
Well, I had a lot of failures last week. I failed to take care of business and finish in the top 10 of Hilton Super Contest because the Rams and the Chiefs let me down. But more importantly, I failed in my bid to make you the Niners GM. I apologize.
I greatly appreciate the campaign. I think it's like any other campaign. It takes a little while, and then the next time we run one, it'll probably be even better.
I did not expect them to make a decision within 48 hours. It kind of ruined the momentum of the campaign.
Yeah.
You did have an interview, though.
Well, the discussions, a lot of people talk to you, but I think their mind was made up to go internally, and I think that's kind of where they want to go in the direction they think is best suited for their franchise. So, whatever they feel. And at this point in my career, I think it's important that you go to the place that's open to new ideas and new challenges and move forward.
Because you're in a nice spot right now because you've kind of...
Yeah, because you've given me the decade of Lombardi. I even get recognized at stadiums now. It's hilarious. I took a picture with a bunch of Browns fans. Hey, listen to the BS Report.
Hey, nice. But you've established a foothold now as a media guy. And now, you don't have to necessarily jump into another situation with a team that you don't feel totally comfortable with, right?
No, I'm very happy with NFL Network. I love doing what I do. I get to stay in football. I get to work at NFL Films. I get to watch football, and I get to study football. I tell a lot of people it's like when I worked at the Raiders. I get to watch the game, and nobody listens to what I say anyway.
Right. Let's talk about the 4 first-rounders.
Yeah.
And Ravens-Chiefs, which... I still feel that the line ended up being, and I know you can't really talk about lines because you work for the NFL, but the line ended up being Ravens by 3, which basically they're a road favorite pretty convincingly. I thought that line was going to be like a pick 'em because the Chiefs have been so good at home. What did you see from the Chiefs yesterday that worried you for their playoff future? Well,
the Chiefs are all about the matchup, and if you have a corner that can go cover, and take Bo out of the game, and you're strong enough to play a 7-man front and handle the internal running game, then you got a chance. Then the Chiefs can't play left-handed. They are a one-dimensional team. I think Denver went in there before Josh McDaniels got fired, played them really close to the vest. Champ Bailey did a wonderful job on taking Dwayne Bowe out of the game. And really, once the trick plays are exhausted for the Chiefs and the reverses and the fake reverses and all that, and you settle down to playing hardcore football, the Chiefs don't have a left hand to go to. So it makes it very difficult offensively. And then defensively, they're going to take away your strength, and then they're going to make you play left-handed if you have a dimension that you can get to. And I'm not sure Baltimore, the way they're set up right now offensively, does. Then the Chiefs become a little bit difficult to deal with, and then they are able to, if they get behind, they're not really built to play catch-up. They're built to stay in the pace of the game. So I think a lot of it had to do with the matchups. I think this is not the right matchup for the Chiefs right now.
This Baltimore matchup is not the right one for them.
No, I think they would have preferred to play the Jets because I think the Jets, even though the Jets would have been able to take Bo out of the game, you can run the ball a little bit on the Jets, and people don't really understand that and how you do it. And the Jets, really, their scheme defensively, people have figured out, and it's this comfortable scheme for teams to watch tape on and how they attack them. So I think really in Kansas City internally, and I know from talking to some of their coaches, they were really wanting to see if they could play the Jets. I think they thought they matched up better there.
Well, that's why I picked them in the Super Contest, because I just assumed they'd rather have the number 3 seed, play the Jets in round 1, and then skip the Patriots in round 2. And yet they lay a stink bomb. Wait, the part that worried me, and we've talked about this in the podcast now ad nauseum, but they couldn't block the Raiders. What do you see there that worries you against this Ravens team?
Yeah, well, there's a lot of teams in the 20 that can't really that have to play ahead of the count. Last night the game was all about the head of the count. I mean, when you watch Seattle play St. Louis, every first down call each coordinator made was critical. And they were trying to get 5 yards. They were trying to stay out of third and long because they knew either team could pass protect in third and long. And really, that's the challenge of the Chiefs. When the Chiefs play against a team like Tennessee that plays a lot of zone and has to get into an 8-man front to stop the run, that's right up their alley. They can handle that, and they can play that effectively. But when they play a team the way Denver played them, where Denver could shut down and still play some 7-man front and not give up the run game, then they don't have a left hand they can drive to the hoop and really feel like they can score. And people want to say, well, it's because Castle's not very good. No, Castle's actually the strength of their team. What's not very good are the other receivers. They have a nice tight end, Tony Milwaukee, but they don't have anybody else. And once you've run enough screens and enough flare passes, I mean, how many more screens and flares were we going to see last night?
Well, and you mentioned, like, it seems like your thinking is that if you have a decent run defense and you have one really good cornerback who can shut down Dwayne Bowe, then the Chiefs have no answer. Do the Ravens have that cornerback?
Well, I think the Ravens' problem are going to be more in the sense of who they are, their identity on offense. The Ravens can stop the Chiefs from running the football. They'll have a hard time blocking this Raven front, which will then put the burden of the game on the quarterback and on the Chiefs' passing game. But what really favors the Chiefs now is I don't think the Ravens' offense is built to get that big lead that they need to really exploit the Chief offense. The Ravens' offense is really, I don't want to say underachieved. It's really slow. They don't have other than Derek Mason, they're back to the same old boat again. I mean, Anquan Bolden's a fabulous receiver, but he's a slot receiver. He's like Wes Welker. He needs to play in the slot. He needs to be matched up. He's a tight end really in body and speed. And they need Stallworth to come through for him, and then they need to stop doing this unbalanced stuff and get an identity on offense. They're kind of they're like the restaurant that's about ready to go out of business because they've tried to cook about 50 things and they can't cook them all good. You know? And that, to me, is when I watch the Baltimore offense. There's no identity. There's no structure to what they're doing. They're just kind of dialing plays, and if they hit a few, and people say, well, they played good against the Saints. Well, if you watch the tape, you know, they hit a check, they hit a tight end delay screen for a touchdown. They hit a wheel route for another touchdown off a turnover, and Ray Rice made a couple big runs. That's not offensive football. That's not precision football. That's making a few plays, and you're not always going to do that.
I watched that game, and I had picked the Saints. And I felt like the Ravens, really everything went right for them in that game, and they won by 6. And that, if you're a Ravens fan, I think that would have to continue. I like your restaurant analogy, though. See,
I believe
it's a good one.
No, that's completely true. Look, anytime you go to the French Laundry up in the Napa Valley, it's supposed to be the greatest restaurant in the world. They have 8 things on the menu.
Yeah.
You can't cook them all. There's the guy in the back. I call it the Freddie Palermo theory. That's my uncle Fred Palermo. He should be on the podcast with you at some point. He doesn't know anything about football, though. That's the problem. He knows a lot about eating, though.
Right.
But the reality of it is he used to say, you know, I never go to restaurants that have a lot of things on the menu because they can't cook them all good. And he was right. And it's the same thing about defenses. If you have too many defenses, you can't run them all good. So you can only, at this time of the year, you have to be fundamentally sound. That's why when you watch the Patriots play, they run their same defenses, but there is slight differences in what they do specifically to the game plan and what they have to take out. But they don't run a new defense each week. People think they do, but the reality of it is it's in their core base, and so there lies the difference.
Well, I love this idea because when we go to lunch or dinner sometimes, and it's one of those places that has a million things in the menu, my wife's always like, oh, my God, look at all these things. I don't know what to get. I always tell her, stay conservative. Go simple. Just get like a burger or something because don't go getting the clam chowder or whatever at a place that's offering you like 150 different options. So there's no way it's going to be good.
No, there's no guy in the back making 8 soups. I mean, come on, really. I mean, they're opening 8 cans. They're not opening up 8 soups, so why would you do that?
So you're saying the Patriots are more like they're just an Italian restaurant, and they're like, hey, look, we have 3 pastas today. We have the chicken parmesan, the veal parmesan, and we have the veal marsala, and we have 1 soup and 2 salads, and here it is.
And whatever you want to go with, we can go right or left hand, and we can beat you any way you want to play today.
I like this. This is my favorite Lombardi since the 2020 thing, which you never got enough credit for. You called out Chad Henne in September. You said he was a 2020 quarterback.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of those in the league, unfortunately. But this really it resonates in a lot of businesses as well, because you go in and you try to do everything and you do nothing. If you try to cook everything, you can't make it all good. And so that's where the Patriots they're able to play right or left-handed. They can do pretty much anything they want to do, but they change their game plan based on specifically what they have to do to attack you, but they don't change who they are. It's a little bit more detailed than just, they're going to come out in 2 tight ends this week. I mean, no, they may spread you out this week because they feel like that gives them the best advantage, but they're still running their core plays.
And in a way, it kind of describes why getting rid of Moss was such a big thing for the offense. And people have concentrated on, the addition by subtraction. They got him out. He was a cancer. He was a headache. Had nothing to do with all that stuff. He just didn't fit with what they were doing. When they got rid of him and they switched him for Branch, that's when they became the team that they always should have been, which is this team that controls the ball with these passes, runs all these different screens, short little in things, and they basically control the ball with the passing game, and then Ellis is the secondary thing. But Moss kind of screwed that up, and I don't think any of us really fully understood that until he left.
Well, what I was saying when they did it is now they opened up their playbook, and really, with more than just opening up the playbook, they opened up the width of the field.
Yep.
Before, they could never really stay on the quadrant Moss was on. It was only going to be a vertical quadrant. Now they can open up the horizontal aspect of the field, and they can run their offense, and Brady can be Peyton Manning-like without all the hand gestures and movements, because Brady now knows, like what he did against Green Bay, he can change the play without really having to change what Moss is doing.
And I think
he doesn't have to worry about that guy over there.
When you look at the 2007 season, and, the first 10 games, it's still the best Patriots performance I've ever seen. And this Patriots team is clearly peaking at a much better time. But a lot of those plays with Moss were just Brady heaving it downfield and Moss chasing it down. I'm not sure that's Brady's strength. He has the arm strength, but throwing deep balls, I don't think he's the best QB in the league or the second best. His strength is with these little things where he turns right and then flips left, and just the precision of every move that he makes. And it seems like after 10 years, they finally have the right pieces for him.
Yeah,
finally.
And we don't want to make this a Patriot chat, but one last thing. Let me say this about Tom Brady. He knows defenses so well that when he drops back to pass and he knows what coverage you're in, if you blow the coverage, if the opponent blows the coverage, he won't throw the ball to that guy.
Yep.
Because he feels the guy's covered.
Interesting.
So therefore he can't throw the ball to that guy. And he would never look to that guy. So that's how in tune he is.
Well, that's a good segue, because I think your best case for this Colts-Jets game, Colts favored by 3, so Vegas feels like these are 2 even teams, is that Manning, much like Brady, the Jets are a little gimmicky. They don't have the solid, like we saw yesterday with the Raiders, just 4 guys rushing the passer. The Jets don't do that. They need to do these blitzes and guys coming from weird angles and all this stuff. That's the stuff that Manning eats up. He loves that, right?
Yeah, no, and that's when the Raiders lost to the Colts, is when they really blitzed. And the other thing that with the Colts now have with Joseph Adaiback, they can actually run it. And what really bothers the Jets is when you run the ball at a fast pace. See, what Rex wants to do is get in the perfect defense all the time. So when you know huddle, but you know huddle to run, he's never set up to really handle that run, because he's always there. Everybody's looking around for the call. What's the blitz? What's the call? What are we doing? And then you can get 6 and 7 yard runs on them. And the other factor about the Jets is, and I don't really want to care how many more emails I get, is somebody tell me when Bart Scott makes a play. Somebody tell me when Calvin Pace makes a play.
How about Darrell Revis? Darrell Revis.
And I'm not even going to go to Revis, because the reality of Revis is he can only guard one guy. Revis Island only has one guest on it. Now, I don't know how that hotel can stay in business. Maybe Fred Palermo stays there too. I don't know. But the reality of it is he can only guard one guy. It's the other guys. And then when you get into a lot of man-to-man coverage, here's a point that nobody wants to talk about. When you play a lot of man-to-man coverage, as the game goes on, do you ever see a receiver when he runs a 9 route, he always waves off and sends another receiver in because he's tired from running so fast?
Yeah.
Well, the DB still goes back and runs. He's got to play the next play. He doesn't get a break. He doesn't get off the field. There's no line shift for defensive backs. So the longer you play man-to-man against Peyton Manning, the less effective you become, because your players get tired.
So is it safe to say that Manning will emulate a lot of what the Pats did in the 45-3 game? He will keep the Jets on the field. They will not do it. It'll be basically a pseudo no-huddle where he'll control the plays at the line of scrimmage without having subs and stuff like that. And the goal is just to wear the Jets down.
Yeah, his challenge will be much like the challenge was when he was with the Raiders. Can they win the one-on-one matchups?
Do they have? So they obviously have Wayne. They have Garcon. Do they have anybody else that you like as a receiver?
Not really. I mean, the Blair White project, I'm not sure that's going to work against the Jets.
Right.
I don't know if that'll work. I think that's a little bit of a problem. But I think what'll work against the Jets is he's got to get a Dye and he's got to get Brown. Those check down passes when he clears out, especially against man coverage, are really what could create some big plays.
Is Revis playing well enough that he could just take Wayne out of the game?
I think at some point, I think it'll be one of those. If he goes and takes Wayne, it'll put more pressure on Cromartie to handle Garcon. And really, remember, Garcon's the guy that beat him last year because Lito Shuffle couldn't handle him. Lito Shepard struggled in the game when they had to put him on the field when Donald Strickland got hurt, and that really broke down the game. And without Dallas Clark, it really becomes a problem. But really, the tight ends on the Colts would have to win the game for them. I mean, that's where the Jets don't really match up their safeties. That's why the Patriots are not a good matchup for them right now.
So it sounds like you're leaning a little bit toward the Colts, and you're leaning Ravens Chiefs. I can't even tell.
Well, I think I'm leaning towards the Ravens in that game because I think the Ravens' defense will stop the Chiefs from rushing the football, and I think the Ravens will be able to control the tempo. They'll make enough plays against this offense. Flacco, to me, I think Flacco's been at a disadvantage, and I get angry with him and upset with him, but I've come full circle on him. I think he's been at a disadvantage more because the offense doesn't have identity, and they're asking him to do a lot of things. Really, that's difficult for a quarterback to do. It's funny, people say Carolina needs a quarterback. Well, if Tom Brady was in Carolina, they probably would need a quarterback too because the way they run offense in Carolina, who can play good there?
So
sometimes that's Flacco. Sometimes I watch Flacco and I think, gosh, the way they're running, the way they're handling this offense, I'm not sure who could play good.
So Flacco's making a pasta in the kitchen. Then somebody else comes in and says, hey, somebody just ordered the Bronzini. And now he's making fish, and it's like, and I'm making
gyro. Actually, somebody comes in and they want a gyro. I mean, you got to change the whole venue. It's terrible. I mean, it's like Poppy. I mean, he was only making pizzas in Seinfeld. I mean, at least he could handle that.
I love this analogy. What are your best? It's a top 5 Lombardi analogy. Let's go to the NFC. I mean, I guess we could skimp over Seahawks, Saints. Is there any way you see the Saints?
I thought the greatest tweet, I don't know, I think Jim Trotter wrote it last night. Somebody said that Sean Payton's sitting at home deciding whether he should rest his starters in week 1.
Oh, nice. Yeah,
I thought it was a great tweet. Look, I think Sean was actually worried about playing the Rams because the Rams at home are a different team than obviously on the road, and Sam Bradford's different. I mean, some of the stuff they could do at home they couldn't do. So I think Sean was probably saying, I think the Seattle team's the team I need to play. They can't really handle a passing game. I've got enough good tape to watch. I'll go back and watch the San Diego, how San Diego moved the ball against them. And unless the Saints break down in the kicking game, which to me, that's the strength of Seattle's offense is Leon Washington. Look, Seattle has to go, when you have to go 5 plays to get a first down, basically. I mean, Seattle's just so much, everything has to go right. Meanwhile, Sean Payton is over there. He's calling plays as if he's in Canada. He gets 2 first downs on 2 downs. And you just can't keep up with the pace. The volume of the game wears you down.
Are you worried at all about the Saints outdoors with the loud crowd, or you think that's overrated?
No, I think it's overrated. Plus, I think Breeze controls everything at the line of scrimmage with his hand signals. He's got such an ability to handle everything that I think it's really not going to be a problem.
Most polarizing of the 4 games, Eagles-Packers. Eagles favored by 2.5. People seem to think the Packers are a tiny bit better. Nobody likes how the Eagles ended the season. Michael Vick looking a little bit tired. Packers coming together. You could argue they're much better than the 10-6 team because of their injuries. Where are you leaning on that one?
This to me is the toughest game to really understand because the Eagles' defense, to me, has always been the problem. They've had a lot of injuries, and they're going to have to prove they can cover these wide receivers. And the scheme, Aaron Rodgers has been absolutely unbelievable the way he plays and the way he handles the the offense and how he runs it. And I think they're so good offensively that it really becomes a burden. They're different than the Giants in how they handle offensively, so I think it's going to be a challenge. And then Michael Vick's going to have to prove he can play, no pun intended here, left-handed. I think the Dom Capers and the Packers, there's enough tape on how you have to play Vick effectively. And I'm not sure they're going to duplicate the Minnesota Vikings blitz because I'm sure the Eagles finally have that figured out by now. But I think you're going to have to figure out, he's going to have to play left-handed. How are you going to handle Michael Vick and how are you going to rush him? They've got great rushers on every level of the Packer defense. Woodson can blitz. He can tackle well. And I think the Packers are the better team here. I think it's a team the Eagles did not want to play was Green Bay.
Both teams had injuries. Yeah. Which team suffered the more debilitating injuries? Because you forget, with the Packers lost Finley. They lost some big guys early on. They've bounced back from that.
Yeah, and Colin Jenkins, all these guys they've lost, they've been able to come back. But I think the Eagles get a break here. Stuart Bradley's a huge loss for them, but against Green Bay, who really doesn't want to run the football, Bradley won't be a loss because they won't need him in there to play run defense. So they'll be fine, and they've played much. They've been able to overcome Bradley. Now, passing game, if they stay base, which I don't think you should do against Green Bay, then all of a sudden the linebackers come into play and their middle linebacker becomes a liability in space. So I think it's going to determine how this game's played. Substitution and really situational football is going to be the key element of this game.
What are the odds on Monday morning you're writing a 3,000-word treatise on some sort of clock management decision fiasco that happened in this game with one of the two coaches?
Between McCarthy and Reed, I think there ought to be we ought to have like a game management coin flipper. Somebody to go out there to flip the coin is symbolic for both. I don't write about Andy Reid anymore. I get all these tweets about, hey, I bet you're going to rip Reid. I'm done. I can't do it anymore.
Right.
I've advised him to outsource it to India. He doesn't want to listen to me.
And McCarthy is secretly Andy Reid 2.0.
Yeah, exactly. He's just up in Green Bay, and you just don't know about it. Packer fans, the poor Cheese Nation, they just wring their hands with it at some of the decisions he makes. And and I think this is a key element that you have to really when you sit down and break down these teams, it's you got to what coach can adjust during the game the best.
Yeah.
Because football is about, we talk about game plans and we talk about the play caller. But really the lesson learned was when Sean Payton was playing against the Falcons the other night, and he had to adjust his game plan. And the Falcons basically played 10 plays too many on defense.
Yeah.
And Sean was able to break the code, and he got into the bank. And there's very few coaches in the league that are as tactically sharp as Sean is that can do that.
And I would say Belichick has that back this year.
Belichick is all about, look, let me say this to you. When Bill hits the field and the whistle blows to start the game, Belichick is in a race. He's not in just like a moment. He's in a race to figure out how you want to play the game. Yeah. And then once he figures out how you're playing the game, then he makes his new game plan.
I thought, I obviously thought old age had maybe hit him last 2 years especially. And not only has he been reinvigorated by the rookies, but just in general. Can we just say that maybe last year's team just wasn't good? Is that possible?
I think he had a lot of guys on that team last year that weren't tough, that weren't buying into the Patriot way, and really, I don't think he had the right blend of coaches around him that he functions the best in. Like when I went up there this summer, I said to him, Bill, you're just having the best time of your life because he can coach everybody. See, what people don't realize about Belichick, if the running back coach didn't show up to work one day, he could coach the running backs. And if the special teams coach didn't show up, he could go do that job. He truly is a head coach. And so when he has a bunch of young, energetic, enthusiastic coaches doing what he wants them to do, he's pretty dynamic.
Could that explain why maybe his coaches haven't gone on to success elsewhere, unlike somebody like Parcells?
I think part of the problem is they don't understand personnel. I think that's a really element that he gets, not so much personnel scouting. People talk personnel, let me look at this guy. It's about evaluating your own team and how your own team compares to the rest of the league.
Right.
That's really a key thing to do. You might look like you got a good player, but if he doesn't match up to the rest of the league, what good is it? He's very good at that. And then I think a lot of these teams that hire Bill's disciples, I think they're getting Bill from New England, and there was a growing process of Bill in Cleveland. And you better be prepared for that growing process.
And Is it safe to say Pittsburgh is the team that has the best chance against them, or do you see somebody else?
I think Pittsburgh's a really dangerous team because of the receivers are really starting to come along. I mean, Hines Ward's still there, and, everybody's going to interview him. I did yesterday after the game, but the reality of that team is it's Mike Wallace's team.
Yeah.
And these younger receivers they have, Sanders and Brown, these guys are really coming along. And it's really making it a lot more explosive offensively. Now, their offensive line is going to eventually break down, and I'm just not sure they can hold on. It broke down against the Jets, and it breaks down in certain areas, and it creates some problems. But for the most part, these young receivers, to me, give Pittsburgh a whole new sense of life and spirit that's going to make them very dangerous this year and next year.
Best way to beat the Pats, do you do the Super Bowl 42 game plan where you just try to control the clock as much as you can, limit their possessions, shorten the time of the game, basically make it a 2.5 quarter game, or is it you try to beat them 41-38?
I think if you get into that up-tempo game, if you try to play the game in the numbers, you're going to lose. I mean, Detroit ran out of gas trying to do that. I think the thing you have to do is play tempo, run the clock, limit their possessions, and put a lot of pressure on them and frustrate them. Play the Peyton Manning game and really frustrate them into having it difficult to work the ball down the field. Create some negative plays, get them off kilter a little bit, and make them have to kind of overcome some situations. But if they get into a rhythm, you're going to have to do something to get them off their rhythm. And then when you have the football, you've got to do something with it. You can't punt on third. You can't punt on 4th and 2. You're going to have to take some chances. And I think the team that beats them will be the best second down play calling team because they realize that they have to get first downs quickly. Because in third down, even though the Patriots are terrible on third down, but it is a change of possession down, and if a ball gets tipped, and if they don't get it, you punt it back to them, you could be down 7. So you got to stay away from as many third downs. This is one of the false realities of the NFL is, third down. You want to limit as many third downs as you possibly can. The teams that win, you win a game with 8 third downs, you're really a great offense. And the great play callers, Sean Payton, and what they're doing in New England are always thinking about Canadian football, calling first downs on 2 downs.
So who is the team best equipped to play that type of game against them?
I think Pittsburgh can do it. I think they have a really good feel for Pittsburgh's defense, though, because Pittsburgh doesn't have an answer for because they know Pittsburgh's defense as well as Pittsburgh knows it. So I think that's a little bit of a problem. Other than Pittsburgh, I don't see a team, Indianapolis up there playing 3 road games because they're the 3rd seed now. I don't see that Indianapolis can go up there and play the second of consecutive road games and be able to beat them. I think Pittsburgh's the only team in the tourney that I think could give them a problem.
Nobody in the NFC?
Oh, well, now the NFC, I think that's a different story. I think New Orleans would be the one team that could give them the most problems.
Not Atlanta? You're not totally sold on them?
I think Atlanta could give them some problems, but if Atlanta gets into that run game mode and makes them play left-handed like the Saints did, Atlanta didn't give me an answer. I was looking for a little bit of diversity. I was looking for some divergent thinking out of Atlanta offensively the other night, and they just really didn't have it when they played the Saints. I like Atlanta's team, but I think when they get them on a neutral field, I think clearly now it's interesting. You know which 2 teams the Patriots practice against this summer?
Who?
The Saints and the Falcons.
Really?
Yeah.
See, you and we felt the same way on that Atlanta-New Orleans game because to me, that's a game that I hope Atlanta learned from because they got too passive. They tried to basically back into the win without actually winning the game, and you just can't do that in the playoffs. You got to win it.
You can't play Sean Payton and give him 73 plays of offensive football. You just can't do it. You got to limit his plays, and you can't give Tom Brady 73 plays. The play count is as important as the clock. And what made like the Packer game remarkable is they only had the ball 21 minutes and they scored 31 points at whatever they did against the Packers. I mean, you've got to limit the amount of plays because if you can limit the amount of plays, you'll limit the score. And the only way to do that is you got to try to control the ball, get off the field. But when that play count goes up like the Saints did against the Falcons ended up essentially playing a doubleheader, and you can't win that.
So it sounds like you're leaning toward Pats Saints. Is that fair?
I think that's fair. I think this Green Bay Philly winner could get some momentum. I really do. I like Green Bay here, but I think the Philly's a tough team to play if you haven't played them. They're faster than you think they are.
All right, so we will talk to you a week from today as we rehash the apocalypse that happened in the Philadelphia-Green Bay game, whatever it might be. We're not sure what it is, but it's going to be something.
And I'll get Fred Palermo to come in and give us a little view on the next restaurant.
Beautiful. Mike
All right.
Lombardi, we'll watch you on NFL Network all week. We'll watch you on Inside the NFL on Showtime on Wednesday, one of my favorite shows, and we'll talk to you next week.
Thanks, Bill.
All right, take care.
Bye-bye.
All right, batting cleanup. The Vegas expert of ESPN and ESPN.com and ESPN the magazine and all of our other ESPN channels. Chad Millman, what's happening?
How you doing?
I'm still licking my wounds from the Super Contest. I should have called you. I was traveling last week, and I ended up going with my gut on the Missouri teams, and I deserve to lose.
Listen to me. I can't even listen to you whine or even lament what happened, because you're walking away a winner. You're walking away with money.
Yes.
I'm walking away bruised and battered and, playing for pride.
I know, but here's the thing. It really was the playoffs of the contest, so to speak, and they had the 3 gimme lines. So all I had to do was really go 1 for 2 with my 2 best picks. And my 2 best picks were the Chiefs and the Rams.
Well, yeah, the Rams actually you can be forgiven for, because everybody was taking the Rams. Nobody was going to.
That's reason not to take them, though. I should have seen that. How many times does that happen when everybody has one side?
It happens. It's the contrarian view. It's what we've been talking about all year. I mean, the contrarian view. If you're playing those games, you're probably winning at a 57% markup. So certainly that's the way to go. Although I don't think anybody was thinking contrarian on St. Louis and Seattle, with St. Louis playing as well as it had been playing, and Seattle playing Charlie Whitehurst, who couldn't even complete a pass when the Seahawks played the Giants earlier in the year. So
I should have stayed away, though, right?
Yeah, you should have stayed away. I mean, there were so many other games to do at the end of the day. And also that Kansas City game, I don't know why anybody, and this I'm sure we'll talk about this, I didn't know why anybody was believing in Kansas City, and I've since done some research and seen why they do, and seen why the line was posted last night, and Kansas City was a 3-point dog at home to the Ravens, and the money immediately went to Kansas City.
Wow!
But there was always something about the Raiders and Kansas City this year that was sketchy to me, and I just felt like they had their number. I mean, obviously the Raiders had everybody's number in the AFC West, but that to me, screamed trap game because of the situation the Chiefs were in.
My other option was to take Tampa Bay +8 and then Atlanta -14.5 and just go for the whole. Atlanta's going to blow out Carolina, and then New Orleans will see that, and they'll back off in the second half, and basically I'll either win both or I'll lose both.
Well, I'm a little surprised you didn't do either of those games based on we emailed during the year, and we had a conversation about how teams that stink at this point in the year stink.
Yep.
Carolina was one of those teams.
Yeah.
And you knew Atlanta was not going to even let them get close to sniffing that game because they wanted to make sure they had home field. And Tampa, you've been on Freeman all year.
I know. They're so banged up. I mean, they had lost so many starters that the thing I was afraid of was the Saints just going up 21-0 in the first quarter. And then with the Falcons game, it was 14.5, and that half point is just scary. I have a lot of regrets, but I'll tell you, a learning experience, much like Sam Bradford going into Quest Field getting his ass kicked yesterday.
Yeah.
A learning experience for me, blowing 13,000 yesterday, basically.
And you know what, though? It was a phenomenal learning experience. Like the whole season, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I loved the agony. I loved standing in front of my television trying to will these teams to win on a Sunday afternoon. I loved not talking to my family for 5 hours on a Sunday because I had to focus all my energy on this particular moment and these particular games. The whole thing, crafting my list on Fridays, everything about it, when we were making our picks, absolutely loved every second of it.
Now, do you think there will be more interest in the Super Contest next year because both you and I were talking about our entries, all that stuff? Like, are they going to be inundated?
Because you were talking about it and I was talking about it. But I do think there will be a huge uptick in entries because I just got so many emails and messages on Twitter about how do you enter, how do you put in your picks if you don't live in Vegas, do you have to go to Vegas to enter, all that kind of stuff. If there's now 20, 30, 40 more entries, which is a significant amount if the total entries was 350 or something like that, I'd be surprised because I got a lot of response, as I'm sure you did, from people saying, hey, this seems amazing. And if you look at it over the course of a year, it's a lot to buy in. It's $1,500 to buy in, but it's less than $100 a week of gambling on these games. And so if you look at it, over that course of the season, it's actually a decent investment. Sort of your fund versus cost investment is actually pretty high.
The thing I loved about it was it made me concentrate so much more on my picks.
Yeah.
And just knowing everything that was going on in every game. And then also, I didn't really need to gamble. Not that gambling's legal, but I didn't need to gamble if gambling were legal because I had these 5 picks every week, and that's all I cared about.
And it was very intense.
Yeah.
It's a very intense way to watch the games, and you feel completely and totally invested, even though it is less than $100 a week in this investment. It's a great way to think about the games, although it caused me so many sleepless nights. The very first weekend when the Cowboys lost to the Redskins and they fumbled that ball at the end of the first half, and that ended up being the difference in that game, I was sick to my stomach almost from that point forward for the rest of the year.
At what point did you start getting bitter? Because you sent me a couple emails where you just seemed bitter that I was doing well.
Almost from the beginning. No, I would say there was a weekend where you had a game. I was so pissed about this because I think I had the other side.
I had a lucky cover, but it was like one of my only lucky covers the whole year, and you emailed me after, like, oh, it must be nice. I was like, whoa.
I think it was the Texans-Redskins. And I had the Redskins, and the Texans came back and covered that game, and it was like the fluke, like a 4th and 10, 50-yard bomb.
They pushed it. No, they pushed it.
Or they pushed? I thought they covered.
No, it was the greatest push I had all year.
Either way, I got to tell you, I think you had a lot more lucky wins than you're giving yourself.
Stop it.
Memory
I did not.
Listen,
I wish I had. I every week I would go 3-2 and felt like I should have gone 4-1 or 5-0.
Yeah, well, every week I went 2-3 and was sure I should have gone 5-0.
Well, next year we'll have to. We'll both be doing it. What's funny is that people think that we've been paid off to talk about this contest. And first of all, we weren't paid off. We put up our own money. And second of all, I just liked it. I thought it was cool.
I totally loved it. Yeah, people think I'm on the take from the Hilton all the time because I talk to those guys all the time, but they're great. And this contest is fantastic.
Well, we'd like to thank Dave Tooley from viewfromvegas.com.
Yes.
For all his help for us.
Yes,
let's go to the games quick because you've been talking to the Vegas people since these lines open. You mentioned the Chiefs-Ravens game opens at 3, and money immediately on the Chiefs even after they got their asses kicked at home against Oakland. Explain.
Well, one, I think a lot of guys just thought this was sort of a bye week for the Chiefs, even though there was something at stake for them in playoff seeding. I think a lot of guys were thinking they're mentally not there right now, and they're thinking about the playoffs, and they're not really worried about the Raiders. This game had no material impact on them. But also they're thinking they're not going to bet on Joe Flacco. They're thinking the Chiefs are one of the better running teams in the NFL. They're 4th in the league in yards per rush. And you got to remember that wise guys, they love the yards per play stat category, whether it's yards per play allowed, yards per play gained, yards per rush. And this one is significant because the Chiefs gained 4 points. No, wait, I'm sorry. Where's my notes here? The Chiefs gained, 4.7 yards per rush.
Right.
So that's 4th in the league. The Ravens gained 3.8, which is middle of the pack in the league. So that's a yard difference. So when you're talking about a spread that is as close as 3, a team that is the underdog at home with home field on its side, with the home fans on its side, the team was 7-0 at home going into the game yesterday. That's a huge advantage for these guys. I mean, they're thinking, all right, Kansas City is going to control the clock. It's going to be a very close game. This is the kind of game where, Kansas City this year lost to passing teams. They lost to the Colts. They lost to the Texans. They lost to the Chargers. So this is the kind of game where they're going to play this game close. And on the flip side, Baltimore, its only double-digit wins this year were against really bad teams, the Broncos and Miami and Carolina and Cleveland. So for all those factors, they're thinking, wait a second, this game is mispriced. This is a great opportunity for us to get a home dog. And that home dogs that are great rushing teams, that subcategory historically performs very well against the spread. And also think about the number. I mean, it's not always just playing the teams against each other. They're also looking at the number, and they see value in playing a home dog at +3.
Is it fair to say that, let's say the Chiefs just beat Oakland yesterday, and it's an ugly win, but they pull it out, whatever. This line is a pick-em?
I don't think so. I think one of the big reasons also you got to remember is public perception. And of all the games that are happening this week, forget the Saints and Seahawks, which is going to be, public perception on the Saints all the way. The other 3 games all opened at 3. So Indy and New York opened at 3, and Green Bay and Philly opened at 3.
Right.
So of those 3 games, Green Bay and Philly, the public perception is going to be equal. Indy at the Jets, or Jets at Indy, the public perception is going to be equal. Bookmakers are expecting to get money on both sides, but with Baltimore and Kansas City, they're expecting money on the Baltimore side. So I don't think the line is all that different. I think that this is the line that is as fair as it's going to get, and they moved it quickly because they're expecting the public to come back and bet it up a little bit, so it'll balance out whatever sharp money they're getting.
I think that line ends up at 3.5.
It's possible. It's entirely possible because more money is going to come in on Baltimore. This is a team. Baltimore is one of those teams. They're verging on a public team. You know, if you talk about the historic public teams, the Colts, the Packers, the Patriots, the Cowboys, the Steelers, those are the historic public teams. And this year's a little different because the Packers are playing the Eagles, and Mike Vick has raised the Eagles to a level that is they're getting a lot of public attention, and the Jets have gotten a lot of public attention. So when they're going against the Colts, who are beat up a little bit, the public perception factor is mitigated a little bit. But Baltimore, I mean, this is a team that's been a part of the conversation for a decade, and this defense has been part of the conversation for a decade. The Chiefs are a part of the conversation for 10 minutes. And so there's not a lot of faith on the side of the public when they're watching Baltimore play in high-profile games and continually win versus an upstart like the Chiefs.
And just a clarification for the young aspiring gamblers listening at home, the high schoolers, the elementary schoolers. Public team is a good thing if you're sharp because that's where you get the most value. If a team is a quote-unquote public team, like I think Peyton Manning is a public team by himself. He just gets that extra respect from everybody, and that's what the sharps love. They love when the public skews the line because the goal of every line is to make it so that there's an even amount of number of action on each side. And if you have a public team that skews the action toward one side, that's where the value comes.
Exactly, and also bookmakers account for that. So oftentimes you're going to be getting public teams are going to have point spreads that are maybe a point and a half higher than they would normally be. Otherwise, if it was an evenly matched power rated game.
Well, see, here's the thing. I thought the Eagles were a public team. I picked that line to be 5. And it's actually 2.5. So could we say that the Eagles and Packers are public teams?
Packers are one of the biggest, most historic public teams there is. I mean, if you forget about sort of the last 10 years where the Colts and the Patriots both became public teams, if you look at the history of the NFL, the public teams are the Bears, the Packers, the Steelers, and the Cowboys. Those are your public teams, and those will always be the public teams, no matter how good or how bad they are, because there's so much deep history and tradition with those teams, especially the Cowboys and the Steelers the past 30 years. I mean, those are two dynasties, so those are always going to be the public teams. You know, the Johnny-come-latelys are the Patriots and the Colts, and this year, like I said, the Eagles are a public team because Michael Vick has brought them so much attention. In the same way the Jets are a public team because Rex Ryan has brought them so much attention. So early in the year when they were playing so well, they got a lot of bettors' confidence, especially square bettors, which is the public and the non-professional bettors. So that's why those games, you know, Green Bay moved in Green Bay's direction. It moved from 3 to 2.5. And I think that's largely because people in the professional community think that Green Bay is actually is much better than a 10-6 team. They saw Green Bay losing to the Bears early in the season on a fumble. The team had 18 penalties. They easily should have won that game. They saw Green Bay play the Patriots great with Matt Flynn. This defense has been playing phenomenally. I think they think of the Packers as a team that beat the Giants and then beat the Bears the past 2 weeks with great defensive efforts, as much as they think of the Packers that were losing in the middle of the season. And Philly, you know, Michael Vick is banged up. You don't know what you're going to get, and so there's a lot of trepidation to put any money on Vick and the Eagles right now, especially if you can get the Packers when you feel like you're getting a little bit of value.
So the line opened at 3 and got bet down to 2.5.
Immediately, the two games that had the most action were Baltimore and Kansas City and Green Bay and Philly.
Wow. Saints giving 10.5 at Seattle. How did they arrive at that line?
Well, that opened at 10, and it's basically because the Seahawks stink. And it doesn't matter, you know, Hasselbeck was upgraded from questionable to probable this morning. And so I asked a bunch of guys, does it matter if he's playing? And the response was, they both stink, we don't care. There's just no faith in anything that the Seahawks can do. And despite the fact they came out and beat St. Louis last night when no one was expecting them to, there's a big difference between the Saints and the Rams. And one of the things, you know, I talked earlier about is yards per play. So here's a great example of yards per play and how much of a difference it makes. Seattle allowed 5.5 yards per play this year. It only gained 4.9. The Saints allowed 5.2 yards per play, but they gained 5.6. So there's a huge difference in both what they're allowing and what they're gaining. And the Saints are on the positive side of that stat. That makes a big deal. It means the Saints are dominating in games even when they're giving up yardage. But the Saints' defense has actually been great this year. It's fourth overall in defense, fourth in passing defense. Its passing offense is fourth. So they're playing the Seahawks, who can't run the ball, the worst rushing game in the NFL. And they're playing a quarterback who's either going to be playing his third start or a guy who's been so banged up he couldn't even play in a division-clinching game. So it's a great opportunity. So I would say it doesn't matter who's going to be playing quarterback. If it comes out later in the week that Hasselbeck actually can't go, I could see this game skyrocketing 12-13.
Cousin Sal and I want to do a 3-team teaser just to have the Saints because we feel like that's a free pick, so it's a 2-teamer and you get to move the line 10 points. As a public service, talk us out of this.
Well, you know how I feel about teasers.
I know.
You know, and also I feel like anytime you're betting double digits on a team at home, it's a little bit scary. So I don't know what your teaser is going to be. Tell me what you were thinking.
Well, you could, if you do a 3-teamer with 10 points, you can tease the Saints down to basically 1. Which, if you think they're going to win, then that's a free 10 points for the other 2 games. You're supposed to be talking me out of this. You just did a like that was kind of a delicious scenario for you.
Yeah, well.
Yes, I've corrupted Chad Bowman.
You know, teasers are dangerous things, but I'm kind of beaten down right now. I don't have a lot of confidence in my picks if I'm making them myself. I can talk to more people than I need to and get great analysis from it. But if I got to do it myself, I start to go a little cold right now.
Colts, Jets, I thought that line was going to be higher. These teams are so schizophrenic. And so are you getting the Colts that just won 4 in a row? Are you getting the Colts that struggled? Are you getting the Colts that Peyton Manning feels like he has weapons, or Peyton Manning is going to get frustrated because his guys are dropping balls? Are you going to get Mark Sanchez, who throws down the field, or Mark Sanchez, who looks like he can't throw beyond 10 yards? What's most interesting to me about this, and one of the reasons I think this line hasn't moved in the same way that the other 2 games did immediately, either one way or the other, is I watched a little bit of that Colts game yesterday, and their rush defense was great. And then I went back and looked at some stats to see how they had done because they were so great against Chris Johnson. The week before against Darren McFadden, they held him to 45 yards. They held Maurice Jones-Drew the week before that to 46 yards. They're actually boning up a little bit in these past few weeks, and it's just impressive. So then I looked at similarities. You know, I like to do comparisons of how teams do against similar opponents. The one similarity to me was the Patriots. And you can speak to this a little bit, but I don't count the Patriots when they lost to the Jets early in the season as the Patriots team that is playing now. Yep. I count them as the team that beat the Jets 45-3. And, you know, then I look at the Patriots who were in the middle of that run when they played the Colts and they beat them 31-28. So I look at that as saying, all right, there's no way anybody can logically bet against Peyton Manning at home if his run defense is doing anything halfway decent. So for me, that's why I don't think this line has moved yet. I don't think anyone has a real grasp of which way to go on this game. Here are my predictions for the line moves. I think the Saints moves to 11. I think the Ravens game moves to Ravens 3.5. I think the Colts moves to 3.5. And I think the Eagles game settles at 3. Agree or disagree?
Disagree. I agree about the Saints. I think the Ravens game is actually going to settle at 3 because I think it's going to get pushed down even more. I've seen places where it might be at 2, 1.5, and 1 right now. So I think that by the time the public gets in on the action, come to the weekend, it'll get back up to 3. I think the Indy game actually gets to 3.5 or 4. I think that people will come in on Peyton and the Colts at home if it moves at all. I mean, it could get. You know, there could be enough balanced action that it stays on 3, and that's a key number, and bookmakers are perfectly happy to have that game land on 3 and not move it at all. And I think you're right about the Saints. I think it goes to 11. I think that's the lowest it's going to go. It'll probably go 12 or 13, I would think. Everybody, come the weekend, everybody is going to come in on the Saints. So, you know, moving from 10 to 11 to 12 isn't that big of a deal for bookmakers because you're playing between key numbers there.
How high could that go? Could that get to 13? That would be pretty good.
I think it could.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you because it goes down to the whole thing like, yeah, that seems high, and then it's like, all right, would you take the Seahawks there? No. So then how high could that go before they have to get an equal amount of action? It seems like they'd have to get that to 12.5 or 13.
I agree.
What was, out of all the people you talked to last night and this morning, what was the best tip that anybody gave you?
Well, I talked to Teddy Covers. I was emailing with Teddy Covers, and the one thing that he liked to talk about is QB rating. So I thought both what guys do and what guys don't do, or what teams allow in QB rating and what teams and what quarterbacks do in QB rating. And I thought the most interesting way that was applied when I went back and looked at stuff was Aaron Rodgers and Michael Vick, and then how much the Eagles give up in QB rating and what the Packers give up in QB rating. And this is what was interesting to me was that while all the money is going the Packers' direction right now, the Packers QB rating allowed is about 99. And the Eagles is at about 92. So that was one thing that I thought, that's interesting. That's something to think about and ponder as this game maybe gets a little bit closer. If it gets down to 2, is that a time to start buying back on the Eagles a little bit? Because then all of a sudden you might start getting some other opportunities that in the line and sort of arbitraging things that you weren't going to get. So I thought that was an interesting stat. But I also just like talking to Covers. He has sound logic.
And Fezzik really had an off year this year after 2 straight Super Contest wins. How's he regrouping?
You know what? He stopped caring in the middle of the year. To Fezzik, it's about time versus money. And at that point in the year, he knew that he wasn't going to win this contest. So he just stopped putting in money. And he was also playing in some huge 6-figure contest somewhere else that he was doing really well in. So he wasn't worried about his $1,500 buy-in there because he wasn't going to make the money, but he had a good chance to make some money in this other contest. I don't know how he did. I haven't checked in with him yet this morning.
So in your column this week, you're going to talk to all these guys, and I hope you do it right and get a lot of different picks and perspectives. So you're going to do that, right?
I hope I do it right. I put one up this morning that talked a little bit about the Chiefs and the Ravens and how that to me was the most interesting thing. But I'll do something definitely for Friday talking about the games and how the lines have moved and who's thinking what, and I will do it right. I'm going to get lots of different opinions.
All right. Chad Millman, we can read you on ESPN Insider. We can listen to your podcast, Behind the Bets, on ESPNRadio.com. I think that's the URL.
Yeah, I don't know.
Joe Mead?
Yeah, you can find it there at the Pod Center page at ESPNRadio.com.
Hey, Joe Mead, thank you.
Joe Mead's a great supporter of the podcast. I really appreciate his help.
Oh, good. Yeah, and we can find you on Twitter, at Chad Millman, and we'll talk to you next week.
Can I pimp one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I just started doing these videos called Right Angles on ESPN.com that are sort of, minor. They're encapsulated tidbits on how to bet smarter. This week will be about Oregon and Auburn in the BCS.
And what is it called again?
Right Angles. Goes up on Wednesdays.
Right Angles. Interesting title. Look at you.
Yes.
You're becoming the Mel Kiper of gambling.
If wishing made it so.
I'm so jealous. Mm-hmm. Chad Millman will talk to you next week.
Talk to you, man. Thanks.
So I get to sign off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Pod Center at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.